Welcome to the Strange Take, where we give you the strange take on all kinds of strange shit we talk about. Anyways, today I'm kind of thinking, what's wrong with the movie industry's writers? From television to movie. That's right. Yeah. So we're going to pick on them today. So, there's those shows and those movies that you've seen you never forget, right? They were masterfully written. They were, they had all the trimmings. Everything was perfect. Like a lot of people, I think, would agree, right? When I say Game of Thrones. That was a big show. Very well written, Storylines were absolutely captivating, right? Well, there's some movies too, When I was growing up, I was a big movie buff, and I spent a lot of time watching movies as a kid. For a couple of years after school, when I was young, I would go to my auntie and uncle's house, and my uncle, they were like family friends, but we called them uncle and auntie and uncle, right? And great people, but he owned a video store. And his whole basement was like his at-home video store, right? So I got to see all the movies that a lot of people didn't, I got to watch movies like Sheena. Sheena, everybody remember her? She was the female Tarzan, And how about that old movie Baby, the baby dinosaur, little brontosaurus they find out in the bush there in the jungles? Nobody remembers those movies. But how about ones like King Solomon's Mines? That's right. Ghostbusters, I remember seeing Ghostbusters. And, there's so many great movies. RoboCop, and Aliens, Alien 1, 2, all kinds of just fantastic movies, There's so many. But they were so well written, Nowadays, you always see that, we'll say the show Stranger Things, right? Very nostalgic, always reaching for all the things from, our contemporary childhood for certain age groups, right? And, music and stuff. Back in the day, you didn't just see a vampire movie. It was like, Fright Night, right? That was a scary movie, Vampire waiting for you outside the window. Oh, no thanks. But movies were full of grandeur. And then, there was the Kevin Costner era, right? I tell you, one of the most amazing movies I ever saw was Dances with Wolves. Fantastic movie. Loved it. Probably seen it 10,000 times, And then later on, we kind of got a big history, awakening. It came out with movies like Gladiator. Wow, what a great movie. And Troy with Brad Pitt. Oh, even better. I thought myself at least, right? Love those two movies. Alexander, it was good. I think the writers were pushing too hard, But, nowadays with movies, you already know how it's going to go down, How about just garbage movies, right? Like movies that are just entertaining, there's no real storyline. Godzilla, right? Big Godzilla fan here. And Godzilla movies, right? What attracted us? Big guy in a rubber suit knocking over toy buildings. Oh, as a young person, you loved it, right? You grow up and you're nostalgic. You have an attachment to Godzilla, right? But then now, they got this new Godzilla movies that came out, and the storylines are terrible, and but the action-packed monster fighting scenes are great. But I'm a little concerned about this new Godzilla versus King Kong, right? That's coming out. Maybe some people listen to this already out, or it's something in the past, right? But as they show in the trailers, is King Kong beating the shit out of Godzilla. And now as we get closer to the release date, the writers are like, well, we decided, Godzilla's always been an anti-hero, so we're just going to try to make him a bad guy. And I was like, well, fuck you, right? So you let the big monkey kick his ass, and and, totally want to see the movie, but I'm just going to see my favorite monster get his ass kicked by some, North American fucking big monkey thing, I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? And then a lot of the shows nowadays too, they come out with these new TV shows, and once in a while you get a big hit, like we go all the way back to Friends, right? That was a huge show, and then, I moved along with a lot of other big shows too, but I mean, and you look at, was a Big Bang Theory, right? Fantastic show. Of course, pulling at our nostalgic strings, right? But it was a great show. Loved it. But then I tried watching some of the other shows I got on TV there nowadays, and storylines just aren't that complicated, and everything seems rushed, deadlines to finish these projects. It's not like the old Hollywood where it was an art and they were constantly inventing new effects, for the movies, and, touching base on things that, humanity, like when they first started bringing, we'll just say like our gay population, right? They were always, kind of the the slapstick character or what have you, right? And now they actually have, shows where, they're being accepted. They're human beings too, right? They got their lives, they do their thing. And it's nice to see that they've been taken out of this, silly character role just because of their sexuality choice, but, when they first were tapping into, that, I don't know what to even say, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? But I mean, it's just kind of like it was just taboo, people were rude about it, 20 years ago, people weren't kind about, people who were gay, and when Hollywood started bringing their stories to light, it was, sensitive topics, right? But, Hollywood got through it and kind of spread the light saying, hey, they're human too, right? And that's really important, like, especially when you see movies like, Philadelphia with Tom Hanks. That was huge, right? A gay man dealing with AIDS, right? How would a movie like that fare? But it did really good, and it deserved to, right? It was a well-written movie. Had a great soundtrack. And there's something else with movies nowadays. You just don't get those big soundtracks, I think Will Smith, in my opinion, killed it with his Men in Black soundtracks. But I remember when some movies, they had these soundtracks where you could sell an album just off the movie because the soundtrack was just fantastic, right? So, trying to find the strange take on it, but it's almost a regular discussion when you look at the movies and Hollywood, and you see pioneers like the Star Wars guy George Lucas, right? How he did his effects and stuff. Nowadays you do anything, you do any effect you want, right? It's all driven by computer graphic cards, and what do they call that? Rendering farms, right? Where they got these like huge, massive warehouses, it's like 6 Costco's, just full of computers rendering the effects, But, the stories, they just, especially right now, we're kind of fading out of the era of superhero movies, right? It was just Marvel superhero movies, and DC was trying to keep up. And then there's the indie heroes, right? And then there's like, franchise movies, right? Transformers and all this and that kind of stuff, But it just seems like the value of the story has been degraded for the value of the effects, maybe. Maybe that's what it really is, and, But the last time you sat down and watched a movie that was just full of grandeur, And I think that's why, like, the show Yellowstone's such a big hit. I think because it taps into those big, wide scenery shots, and it shows you how small we are. You see 2 cowboys, like 2 little black dots riding along this green field, but it's this huge shot of grandeur. It reminds you of how big the earth is and how small we really are, And then, you show a scene of a city and it's all concrete and streets full of people, and it's like, oh boy, that's exciting, but I'd rather be out with the cowboys on the field there, probably having a little whiskey and a cigar, right? Well, yeah, what do you think, right? What do you think of the movies that you grew up on and the movies that, your kids are growing up on, right? I mean, for us, a big comedy, I forget what it was called. It was like Porky's Revenge or something when we were young, and Animal House, right? And then they came out, the newest, newer revelations of those movies would have been, for our era, would have been the American Pie, right? Youth dealing with sexuality and all these funny things. Like Dazed and Confused, right? There's another movie. Those are always really big movies, because it's kind of, everybody can relate to the storylines that the writers would write. But nowadays, these storylines are very generic, and you see in shows like Walking Dead, they 5 seasons of just taking characters each season and switching that character's problem to the next character, and and everybody's just living out everybody else's problems and recycling storylines, right? That's even like with shows like Star Trek, right? I mean, they had The Next Generation, a great show, and then, they came up with the Deep Space Nine, it was like, it was alright, and then, Voyager came out, they'd have 27 million viewers tune in once a week to watch that, Nowadays, it's big if you get 8 million viewers. I mean, Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, they've all, had viewerships of 8 million, and that's considered like #1 show, in the country, right? In the world even. But, ultimately, there's only a few shows that are written that well, right? And then there's those shows, that not everybody, there's those big cable shows, Grey's Anatomy and 911. I never really got into those shows myself, I did a little tour of duty with CSI, but CSI was just the new NYPD or whatever. How about the old show, as we're talking about cop shows and law and stuff, how about the old show Night Court, eh? Well, not a good show. Bull and all their adventures there, and Cheers, what a great show that was, right? You don't get shows like that anymore. And, it'd just be nice to see Hollywood, reach deep, reach a little deeper, put a little more substance out into the stories, and if you're doing something like, King Kong versus Godzilla, well, Godzilla's gonna kick King Kong's ass. That's how it should be. And the reason why it should be like that is because, well, who's got more movies, right? Who's made more money? Godzilla has. But they're just flushing them down the toilet now because, Hollywood's saying, well, we're going to lose Godzilla back to the Toho creators, so let's beef up King Kong and we'll do some King Kong fucking movies. Well, who gives a shit about King Kong? It's a big fucking monkey. And he's got nothing special. Now they got to give him battle axes and make him really smart. And, really, I mean, you're fighting a Titan with full of fire and armor as thick as this fucking, a wall on 5 battleships, I mean, it's just kind of silly. But yeah, Hollywood and their writers, maybe they'll do another strike or something. Well, there's not many left out there. One of the other best shows ever on television, Battlestar Galactica rebooted through Ron Moore. Of course, Star Trek Next Generation and many other big shows too. So, when you do see a show and that the people involved, the producers or the writers, and a lot of times the producers even have say over the writers. So you might have some shitty writers, but the producer is fantastic, right? And, so, you give the show a chance, right? Because you see that name that you recognize, right? And, besides Kevin Costner and his Waterworld and Postman movies, everything else has been just a fantastic movie, Untouchables and Dance with Wolves. So, some things to think about. Old Hollywood, new Hollywood, the writers, what are they doing? And what's the strange take on all that, eh? But speaking of the strange take, everybody, it's time to wrap up the podcast. So, this is the strange take. Wishing you all a good day and giving you a little Hollywood to think about. Take care, everybody. Bye.